She didn't come to court to make a scene, just to file a housing verification form, fix a ticket she never remembered getting, and head home before noon. But the deputy barely glanced at the screen before stepping forward. "Kiona Ward? Hands out. You're going in cuffs." No explanation, no questions. Just cold steel tightening around her wrists before she even opened her mouth. She didn't resist. Didn't ask why. She learned a long time ago that when the system already thinks it knows who you are, talking only makes things worse. People turned to look as she was led through the hallway. A few stared. One woman pulled her child closer. Somewhere, someone muttered something about another one who thinks the rules don't apply. They didn't see the folder still clutched in her cuffed hands. Didn't see the court-ordered letter she'd spent weeks chasing across 3 counties. They saw what they wanted. Another face in the crowd. Another case to process. The deputy sat her on a wooden bench outside courtroom 2B. Her hoodie tugged slightly as she leaned back, just enough to shift the fabric at her wrist. It slid up maybe an inch. That's all it took. The inside of her left forearm caught the light. 9 short marks. Perfectly aligned. Burned, not inked. Each one exactly a 1/4 inch apart. She didn't cover them. Didn't flinch. At first, no one noticed. Then someone did. A paper stopped rustling. A clerk looked up from her phone. And a young officer from the county JAG office went pale. That's when the doors opened. Commander Elijah McGraw stepped into the hallway, dressed in full uniform. Decorations across his chest. Eyes locked on her. He stopped cold, looked at the cuffs, then at her arm, and said quiet, firm, final, "Uncuff her. Now." The room froze. Because those weren't just marks. And she wasn't just a woman in a hoodie. She was the Overwatch sniper from Ghost Company 7. The one who stayed on comms through the night after the blast at Crimson Fold. The one they listed as presumed dead in the Fallout report. The one who wasn't supposed to walk back into a government building ever again. But she did. And now, they knew. Before the handcuffs, before the courtroom, Kiona drove south in silence. The road from Klamath Falls to the coast was long, cracked, and mostly empty-lined with pine, power lines, and too many ghosts. Her destination was the Alama County Courthouse, but her mind kept drifting back to the place she'd left behind. She lived in a converted shipping container, 1 stove, 1 cot, and thin metal walls that groaned when the wind pressed hard enough. In winter, the cold seeped in through the floor. In summer, the heat pooled like steam beneath the ceiling. Still, it was hers. It didn't ask questions. It didn't need explanations. That was enough. She paid rent in cash. No name on the mailbox. No lease. No trail for systems to follow. Letters from the VA still found their way there, often late, sometimes not at all. Most came filled with contradictions, vague instructions, and forms that didn't match the ones she'd already filled. The latest packet included a warning. Her housing voucher had been suspended due to an unverified address change. Another letter arrived days later, referencing a court summons for a citation she'd never received, delivered to an address she hadn't used in years. That mix-up triggered the review, which paused the benefit, which froze the file, which required a court-verified correction in person. So she came. By then, she'd stopped hoping someone might ask how it happened. No one at the front desk wanted context. They didn't see the night spent curled in a coat under fluorescent lights. They didn't see the phone calls that ended in transfers. They didn't see the morning she was turned away from the VA because her appointment was scheduled in a different district, one she hadn't lived in since the war ended. They saw a woman in worn boots and a hoodie. A folder under one arm. Another case. Another delay. That morning, she'd risen before the sun, made coffee over open flame, checked the envelope 3 times, then drove west through the hills, watching the fog thin as the sun crept over the treetops. By the time she reached the courthouse lot, the dashboard clock read 9:07. She walked in, waited her turn, said her name. And without hesitation, the deputy reached for the cuffs. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't ask why. The system had already decided who she was, and she knew better than to try to change its mind. The courtroom felt colder than the hallway. Not because of the air, but because of the stairs. Kiona stood beside the deputy as Judge Harold Brennan scanned her case file. His voice was flat, eyes still on the page. Case 4271. B. Kayana Ward. Failure to appear. Municipal Citation 15.2. 7. Fine. 240. Remand order is in effect. He hadn't looked up yet. When he finally did, there was no curiosity, no concern. Just procedure. Efficient. Detached. Ma'am, the citation was issued 6 weeks ago. You failed to respond. As such, I never received it, she said, steady. The VA changed my address without. He raised a hand, cutting her off. Not unkind, just uninterested. The responsibility to maintain proper contact with the court lies with you, not any outside agency. The warrant stands. A few seats behind her, 2 junior JAG officers exchanged quiet remarks. One leaned over. Bet she's going to play the trauma card. The other barely smiled. PTSD and a parking ticket. We've seen it before. They didn't speak loudly, but the silence in the room gave every syllable weight. Kayona heard them. So did the clerk. So did the woman in row 3 who shifted in her seat, then looked away. Her jaw tightened. Not from the fine. Not even from the cuffs. What cut was how they looked at her. Like a system glitch they had to resolve. Like background noise. The judge saw another name to clear off his desk. The officers saw a story they'd already decided wasn't worth hearing. Not one of them recognized the woman who'd memorized an evac grid under fire, called in the last coordinates from a collapsed forward operating base, and stayed on the line until the last helicopter rose behind her. None of that was in the file. Judge Brennan lifted his gavel. You'll be remanded to county holding until payment is resolved, or a verified plan is submitted. The knock echoed dull, final. Next. The deputy reached for her arm. She didn't pull back. Didn't speak. The moment where anyone might have listened was already gone. They walked her out the side exit of the courtroom. The hallway was quiet, too quiet for a government building mid-morning. The deputy stayed close, hand on her upper arm. Not aggressive, but not casual either. He was doing his job, just like every other Tuesday. Kayona didn't look around. No reason to. She knew the way holding cells worked. This wasn't the first time someone treated her like a mistake. Then it happened. Not loud, not dramatic, no music swell. Just movement. Just motion. As she turned slightly, the chain between the cuffs tugged against her sleeve. The fabric caught, then slipped. 3 inches. Maybe less. But it was enough. The inside of her left forearm caught the light. 9 marks. Burned, not inked. Evenly spaced. Clean. Permanent. They weren't decorative. They weren't accidental. Anyone who recognized them would stop. One man did. A JAG captain, walking the other direction, paused mid-step. Mid-breath. His file slipped from his hand. Papers scattered. He didn't even blink. His eyes locked on the marks. Not her face. Not her clothes. Just that arm. He didn't bend down. Didn't speak right away. The hallway's buzz slowed, as if something unseen had shifted in the air. Kayana noticed the silence. She turned slightly, confused not by fear, but by instinct. Something had changed. Then the captain moved forward. 1 step, voice low. Where did you serve? Not a demand, not skepticism. Something quieter, almost reverent. Kayona didn't answer. She didn't flinch. Didn't cover her arm. Didn't explain. Her eyes met his, steady. He kept staring at the scars. Those burns? That spacing? Gosco 7, right? Still, no response. But her posture shifted. Just enough. She stood taller, shoulders relaxed. Not pride, not defense, just presence. The deputy looked back, then down at her wrist. You know what that is? He asked the captain. The man nodded. Slowly. Yeah, I know exactly what that is. Then, without warning, the elevator at the end of the hall opened. Rear Admiral Elijah McGraw stepped out, still in dress whites. Chest full of ribbons. Expression unreadable. He looked from the captain to the deputy and then straight at Kayona. No surprise in his eyes. No hesitation either. He walked forward calmly, not rushed, not slow, just direct. When he reached them, he stopped, looked once at the cuffs, then at her exposed arm. "Uncuff her," he said. No raised voice, no explanation. Just those 3 words. The hallway stood still. Nobody questioned it. Nobody spoke. The deputy hesitated for a split second, then reached into his belt, pulled out the key, and turned it. The cuffs clicked open. Kiona didn't rub her wrists. Didn't pull her sleeve down. She just stood there. Still. Breathing. People had started to watch court clerks, another officer by the side door, even the receptionist from earlier. But their eyes weren't filled with judgment anymore. Something had changed. They didn't see a file number. They didn't see a mistake. Now, they saw what the Admiral had seen the moment he stepped through the door. Someone who'd survived what others couldn't. Captain Isolde Harlan had seen her share of classified files, after-action reports, and redacted transcripts. Years in military law had trained her to filter emotion out of every line she read. But nothing prepared her for what she saw on Kiona Ward's forearm. She stepped out of the hallway into a secure clerk's terminal. The screen blinked once, waiting. Her ID granted base-level clearance not enough, but she knew the override sequences. 2 codes. 1 palm scan. She didn't pause. Within seconds, she was inside the restricted archive. She entered the name. Ward, Kiona, M. Date of birth, August 2, 1980. 3. Status, deceased. Date of death, November 18, 2012. Cause, Kaya, Operation Copper Rain. Assignment, Ghost Company 7. Call sign, Overwatch 7. Postmortem notes, redacted, full access denied. The field marked Final Image was blank. No recovery report, no autopsy, no forwarding to next of kin. Nothing but an official stamp. Kia. Harlan stared at the entry longer than she realized. Everything matched. The name, the call sign, the unit, the date. But Kiona Ward had just been arrested on a parking citation 13 years after her death was recorded. And Ghost Co 7 was never meant to leave a trail. She stepped back from the monitor. Her breathing stayed calm, but a tremor ran down her wrist. Not fear, recognition. This wasn't a clerical error. This wasn't urban legend. The woman they'd processed this morning had once been the eyes and voice of a battlefield that never made it into textbooks. She moved quickly through the hallway, found Admiral Elijah McGraw near the scanner desk. His arms were crossed. He was waiting for something. Maybe this. "Sir," Harlan said quietly, "she's in the system. Officially Kia, Operation Copper Rain, entire file locked." McGraw didn't flinch. "She made it out," he said. "But the mission didn't. That's how it works for ghosts. No record, no funeral, no questions." Across the room, Kiona sat on a wooden bench, elbows resting on her thighs, gaze lowered. Her hands were still, but her mind wasn't here. Not anymore. She was back under 20 feet of concrete and rebar, trapped beneath what used to be a schoolhouse in Yemen. Blood filled her mouth. One rib was broken, grinding against muscle with every movement. The team's comms were buried except her shoulder mic, still functional, clipped against a shredded vest. She crawled toward daylight with only one working arm. Her boots had been lost in the collapse. Her vision swam in and out through one swollen eye. But she tapped the mic. Twice. Then spoke. "This is 7. Location compromised. Beam still standing. Requesting evac markers." The channel crackled. Seconds passed. Then came the voice. "Copy, Overwatch. We've got you." She stayed in place for 9 more hours. Her signal rerouted air support, marked debris zones, walked 2 fire teams through a minefield using only landmarks she could remember by feel. By the time the last bird lifted out, 5 soldiers owed her their lives. But none of their reports mentioned her name. The file had already been sealed. Back in the courthouse, Kiona remained seated. Her folder still rested on her lap. No cuffs now, no bailiffs nearby. Just space, finally. She wasn't a legend, wasn't a ghost. Just a soldier who had survived something no one else could tell. Admiral McGraw approached the booking officer, a young man who looked as though he just realized the gravity of what he'd done. "Who brought her in?" McGraw asked. The officer cleared his throat. Failure to appear. Civil citation. April. Is it resolved? The young man fumbled with the terminal. No, sir. Pending hearing. McGraw looked at Kiona. She raised her eyes, expression calm. Want it cleared? He asked. She didn't hesitate. Let it stay. A pause. It's the only thing that proves I was here. Across the lobby, Harlan stood silently. She hadn't said a word since pulling the file. She didn't need to. There was no confusion anymore. Kiona Ward was real. She had fought in a campaign no civilian would ever read about. She had survived an operation deemed impossible, and then been written out of history by design. The courtroom had mistaken her for someone careless, a woman who ignored paperwork, who missed her date, who let things slide. They couldn't have been more wrong. Admiral McGraw turned to the deputy posted at the hall. Escort her to the green room. Do not book her. No holding. Yes, sir. Kiona stood, lifted her folder, and followed. No resistance, no words. But this time, no one touched her. No one gripped her arm. No one tightened cuffs. She walked on her own. And the halls watched in silence, unsure of who she had been, but suddenly aware that she had always been more than they saw. Kiona waited in a quiet corner of the administrative wing. The room had no windows, just cinder-block walls and a flickering overhead light. She didn't sit. Movement buzzed under her skin, not nerves, just habit. A readiness that never left, even after all these years. Captain Isolde Harlan stood in the adjacent office, her focus locked on a classified database. The system filtered requests through red tape, blacked out mission logs, scrambled dates, location tags that meant nothing without context. Still, she kept digging. Then a name surfaced. Lieutenant Felix Brogan, one of the survivors from the Hellman collapse, now assigned to a logistics post just 10 miles down the road. She made the call. 20 minutes later, boots echoed down the corridor. Brogan stepped in wearing a civilian jacket over his fatigues. There was nothing remarkable about his appearance. He looked like any off-duty reservist passing through base. But when his eyes landed on the woman behind the glass, something in him caught. Recognition struck hard, not instant but irreversible. He took a slow breath and whispered, "It's her." Harlan opened the door without a word. Kiona turned at the sound. Brogan froze in the doorway, like something sacred had been unearthed after years of doubt. "We never knew your name," he said, "only the voice." She nodded once. "You made it out," he added, "because of you." From the inside pocket of his coat, he drew a weathered card. Edges blackened, corners brittle, the map still legible. "I kept it," he said, holding it gently. "Didn't know who Overwatch 7 was, just knew I owed them everything." She didn't reach for the card, just acknowledged it with a glance. "You weren't the only one we guided," she said. Her voice stayed level, grounded. News spread quickly. Downstairs, a young records clerk overheard the exchange. His brother had once mentioned a woman on the radio during a failed extraction in 2011. Calm, under fire, unseen but unforgettable. At the far end of the corridor, a logistics officer recalled a mission rerouted just hours before a convoy would have hit a roadside ambush. The source of that last-minute intel had never been named. Another staffer, a nurse, paused while sorting case files. She remembered 2 patients from years back, both pulled from a collapsed school in Kandahar. They talked about a woman who stayed on comms while the building burned around them. Each memory surfaced quietly. Different voices, separate stories. But a shared thread ran through them all. They hadn't known her name. They'd never seen her face. Yet now, standing in that hallway, something clicked into place. No one needed confirmation. They remembered the way a steady voice had cut through chaos. How it had sounded unshaken, even when the situation wasn't. Kiona didn't step forward, didn't offer details or timelines. She stood still, listening as her own life echoed back to her in fragments. Each one real, each one told with care. People began to gather. Someone stepped aside to give her space. Another removed his cap, unsure if it was appropriate but feeling like it was. No applause. No official acknowledgement. Just awareness, settling in slow. In every branch of service, There are names whispered more than spoken figures, remembered not for medals or rank, but for what they carried through the dark. Kayana had been one of them, buried by protocol, forgotten by files, yet kept alive in memory. She hadn't expected this. Recognition had never been the goal. But now that it was here, she didn't flinch. McGraw stood in the background, arms folded. He didn't interrupt. He'd seen this happen once before long ago, with another ghost. It never began with ceremony. It began with silence, slowly filled by those who had never truly forgotten. Captain Harlan turned toward Brogan, her expression softer now. They listed her as dead in 2012, she said quietly. They were wrong, Brogan replied. He looked at Kayona again. There was no disbelief in his gaze now, only reverence. The room fell still once more. Kayona turned toward the window. Afternoon light stretched across the floor in clean lines. Outside, the flag moved gently with the wind. She didn't smile. But something in her face loosened like a held breath had finally been released. This wasn't vindication. It wasn't glory. But it was real. They had erased her from the official record. But the truth had waited. And now it had surfaced not from files, but from people. She had never needed a platform. Only a moment where someone finally looked and saw. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The hallway had fallen into a hush again. Not the silence of confusion, but of recognition settling in. Kayona stood by the wall, her back straight, folder still in her hands, the same worn folder she'd carried in at 8:43 that morning. Through the scanner, through the cuffs, through the misjudgments, she hadn't let go of it once. Rear Admiral Elijah McGraw stepped closer, the soft tread of his polished shoes the only sound breaking the stillness. No one spoke. No one needed to. There was weight in the air now. Not tension, not anymore. It was something slower, something steadier. Like the first second after a storm passes and no one's sure whether to speak. He paused beside her, hands behind his back. This isn't what you came for, he said. It wasn't a question. No, sir. Her answer was quiet but firm. I came to verify housing, fix a clerical error, pay a fine if needed, then go home. McGraw gave a slight nod. His gaze didn't shift. And now they know who you are. She didn't speak right away. Her eyes dropped not from embarrassment, but exhaustion. The kind that builds not from one bad day, but years of being misunderstood. That wasn't part of the plan. Plans never last long in places like Helmand, he replied gently. They both understood what that meant, the randomness of war, the futility of control, the moments that rewrite lives in seconds. From behind, the door to the judge's chambers creaked open. Judge Brennan emerged slowly, his face a shade paler, the lines around his eyes tighter than before. He wasn't the same man who had handed down a fine an hour earlier. Not completely. He approached without speaking, flanked by the courtroom clerk and the two JAG officers now noticeably less assured than when they'd mocked her file. McGraw turned to face them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Before you speak, he said, his tone low and steady, you need to understand what almost happened here. They stopped. You were about to process a decorated warfighter into county holding. Not because of intention, because of routine, because you didn't ask. He let the sentence hang in the air. She was never here for drama. She didn't ask for attention. She never revealed who she was, because real ghosts don't introduce themselves. The judge shifted uncomfortably, lips pressed thin. But if you work in a building that serves a base where people like her once trained, then you'd better sharpen your eyes. You need to see more than names on paper. One of the officers lowered his head. The other clasped his hands behind his back, visibly trying not to fidget. Judge Brennan finally cleared his throat. Miss Ward, I'd like to offer. Don't, Kayona said. Her voice was calm, not cold, not cruel, just final. I didn't come here for apologies or explanations. She stepped forward, extending the folder she'd held all day. I came to submit this, that's all. The judge took it with both hands, carefully, not like a man signing a file, but like someone handling a story he now understood was real. It'll be processed in full, he said. Today. Kayona nodded once. No thank you. No satisfaction. Just resolution. McGraw turned to her. A faint trace of something unreadable behind his eyes, respect, maybe, or relief. You could have kept walking, he said. Nobody would have blamed you. That was the original plan, she answered. Quiet in, quiet out. But someone saw. She didn't respond with words. Instead, her shoulders softened. The lines in her brow eased. A breath left her lungs long, unforced like something deep inside had finally been set down after too many years of carrying it alone. She looked up, eyes steady. I didn't want this, she said, not accusing anyone, not pitying herself. But maybe they needed to see it. No one replied. Not McGraw, not Brennan, not the officers. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been understood. For a few seconds, they all just stood there, 5 people who would never forget what silence had revealed. And Kayana turned toward the exit. Not as a defendant, not as a witness, just as herself. She didn't wait for handshakes. No parting words, no instructions. The moment the judge finished signing, Kayana folded the stamped document, slid it back into her folder, and turned toward the hallway. Her jacket sleeve shifted as she reached for the door briefly. The lines on her arm caught the light again. This time, no one gasped. No one whispered. They'd seen enough. She adjusted the sleeve until it covered every mark, then stepped outside. The courthouse lobby hummed with the usual static. Shuffling papers, a printer chewing through copies, murmurs over missed dates and rescheduled hearings. No one recognized her now, which was just the way she preferred it. The sun met her at the steps, midday warmth, unfiltered and honest. She blinked once, took in the sky, then moved toward the parking lot with a pace neither rushed nor slow, just measured. Halfway to her car, someone called out behind her. Ma'am, wait. The voice was young, out of breath. A girl in khakis and a VA badge jogged toward her, maybe 20, maybe less. Hair tied in a loose ponytail, sneakers untied, face flushed from the run. Sorry, the girl said, slowing to a walk. I saw you earlier and I didn't know, but then someone said. Kayana raised an eyebrow, silent. My mom. She works at the VA in Portland. Intake processing. I think you talked to her once. She said your case file just kept bouncing. Said she tried to fix it, but… The girl trailed off, then stepped closer. She said to tell you thank you, for not yelling, for being kind, for not giving up. Kayana nodded once. Words didn't seem necessary. The girl hesitated, then added, and for what you did in 2012. She doesn't know all the details, but she said, you helped people when no one else could. I tried, Kayana said quietly. You did. With that, the girl turned and walked back inside, her sneakers slapping the tile in uneven rhythm. Kayana unlocked the driver's side door of her pickup. Engine old but dependable. A few bullet hole patches on the tailgate still visible if you looked hard enough. She placed the folder on the passenger seat, started the ignition, and rolled down the window halfway. The courthouse shrank in her rearview mirror as she pulled onto the road. Stoplights turned green without waiting. Traffic moved without effort. The radio stayed off. Wind filtered through the cab, brushing her collar. That familiar hum returned the one she remembered from the nights in Klamath Falls, when the container walls caught just enough breeze to sound like breathing. Mile after mile passed without thought. No destination urgent. No one expecting her. She wasn't driving toward anything in particular, just away from what no longer needed explaining. Out past the edges of the city, the road flattened. Hills rolled like quiet shoulders in the distance. Telephone poles marched alongside her truck, their wires swaying like old arms remembering rhythm. At a red light just outside the county line, a pair of kids crossed in front of her truck. One waved. She nodded back. Not one person asked her name. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like erasure. It felt like peace. Kayana Ward never gave interviews, never claimed her service, never applied for the medal still technically owed to her. But if you stood on the ridge above her property at sunset, you'd see the porch light flicker on, same time every night. A signal. Not for rescue, not for recognition. Just a quiet reminder that some ghosts don't disappear. They simply go home. Some heroes never ask to be noticed. They don't carry medals or speak of what they did. They stand in line like everyone else. They wait. They endure. But that doesn't make their story any smaller. Kiona Ward taught us something that goes far beyond uniforms and call signs. That dignity isn't granted by a court or worn on a sleeve, it's lived. In silence. In persistence. In choosing not to strike back, even when misunderstood. There are people all around us carrying invisible scars, some from war, some from life. The least we can do is look closer. Ask before judging. And never assume quiet means weak. Whether you've served or stood beside someone who has, you understand this truth. Recognition delayed is still recognition. And sometimes, the greatest honor we can give is to finally see someone for who they are. If this story touched you, hit subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. We'll keep bringing you true stories that remind us what still matters. Until next time, thank you for being here, and may you always be seen with kindness.